I'm Jay Scruggs. This is Sue Zecco. This is our Maltese we're going to do in a pet trim for the day. This is Juliet.
Ireland.
Juliet, Ireland. And we're going to be doing a basic pet trim with snap-on combs. We're going to show you how to work on the drop-coated breeds. She's got a really soft coat, and her hair is, it does have a lot of different textures, so we're going to be using snap-on combs to set in our length, and then we're going to be using thinning shears and scissors to get a nice finish on the dog to make her look as natural as possible. So we're going to start out using the 1/2-inch snap-on comb. These are the stainless steel snap-on combs by Wall.
When you talk about the blow drying, keeping his coat flat.
Okay. One thing when you're prepping this dog, when you have these dogs in your shop, the worst thing you can do is take your force dryer and blow all of the hair the opposite direction that it grows. So as your bather brusher, or if you're bathing and brushing the dogs themselves, make sure you blow the coat in the direction that it lays, and that'll give you a lot better finish once you take these clippers through the dog's coat. And you never want to take the comb, for instance, before you start to clipper this dog, you never want to take the comb and comb everything back. If we back comb the dog and run our clipper through it, it's going to cut it a lot shorter than the length we're trying to set in. So comb everything in the direction that it grows and run your clipper in the same direction as you comb.
So as I come down the back of her neck, I usually like to start up around the head, and I'm just holding her ears, pull her ears forward, and I'm not going to start right at the occiput or the bone on the back of the head. I usually start probably about a good inch and a half behind, so that you have a little bit of hair for blending on her back skull. So I'm pulling her ears forward, and like Jay said, I'm following exactly the way that her hair is growing. I'm going to come down her sides, come down her shoulders. When I come down her shoulder, I'm going to just kind of skim straight down. I don't want to come in and stop, and I want this to be a parallel line from her neck straight down to the floor. So I'm just going to skim straight down, and the same thing on the front of the leg. On her, I'm going to leave a little bit, easy girl, I'm going to leave a little bit of a bib. So I'm going to hold her ears and her chin up out of the way, and I'm going to start right up in her throat
just about where the Adam's apple is.
Right.
One thing about these little breeds, little drop-coated breeds, where we're trying to make a nice round head on them, if you don't take this clipper line right up to the Adam's apple, you're going to wind up leaving a lot of length on the chin, and it's going to make the dog's face look really heavy, and you're not going to get this nice round, cute little expression that we're trying to achieve by taking it up to the Adam's apple. And what this does, by taking it to the Adam's apple and then just right behind the back skull here, it actually just takes this dog's head and separates it from the rest of the body, so we'll have a lot more expressive look in the end when we're done.
Now I usually this is her breastbone right here, so I usually come to just above the breastbone, and as I get to that point, I skim out with my clipper. And again, I'm using these stainless steel combs, and they really glide through the coat nice. I've come straight down on her shoulders, so it goes straight into her legs. You don't want to leave a lot of extra bulk on the back of the leg or in the elbow area, because as she's walking, it'll look like she's really sticking out, and it'll make her look very bow-legged in the front. And I skim down the front of the leg, and that just kind of sets the leg back under her a little bit, but I'm leaving a little bit of a bib, so it's almost like a little inverted V from her breastbone into the front of her front legs. Then again, I'm just going to follow down. That's a good girl. I usually make like one swipe down the center of the back using the snap-on, and then from that point, follow the way the hair grows. And I'm going to follow along her rib cage and just kind of drop off from underneath. If I leave this line up high, she'll have more of a skirt, and what will happen is as she's walking, her rib cage will kind of swing, and if you leave a lot of this extra hair on her sides here, it's going to make her not only look pudgier, but it's going to make her trim look just a little bit fuller, and it's not going to move right with her when she moves. There's going to be a little bit too much hair, plus it's a little bit more hair for matting. I'm coming off her back end, again following the way her hair grows. I'm going to lift her tail, and I'm going to skim off some of this stuff on her back end. Skim down her leg.
And what Sue just did with the snap-on comb, she just took a dog that was long and low to the ground and made it look a lot shorter in body just by taking this angle down on the dog's rear end. And if you pick the dog's back leg up and bend it, what she did, she clipped right down with her snap-on comb to the bend in the leg, and that automatically creates the illusion that the dog has a lot more angulation.
Okay, same thing, come around this side. Even on doing my snap-on work, if my lovely assistant Jay will give me a squirt.
Squirt?
Because even, especially with the metal combs, you tend to get a lot of static. So give the coat a little bit of a squirt, and it helps get rid of the static as you're going through them.
And this is an anti-stat detangling spray we're using. It's just something really light. It doesn't have any silicone in it. It doesn't build up in the coat. This is actually a coat handler product. But it just gives it that little bit of moisture where as she's going through, the more she goes through this coat, the more the static will build up. So always make sure you keep a spray handy when you're doing a lot of snap-on comb or scissor work. And you have to remember when grooming these drop-coated breeds like this, one thing you don't want to do is follow the conformation of the dog, because 99% of the dogs we groom aren't built as well as, you know, a lot of the show dogs you see, so you can't actually just follow this dog's outline. If we did, what would happen with this little girl, she'd look really long in body, and we wouldn't have a lot of style to her. So by leaving the hair on the legs, the fullness on the legs, it's going to balance out the width and the weight of this dog's body with the legs. Just by leaving a little bit more hair on the legs, the dog's going to look a lot more balanced. And especially by taking all this off in the rear end, it takes your eye away from the rear end of this dog and draws it forward.
I saw a sticky uppy. Okay, now I'm going to...
And we always recommend using these snap-on combs. When you're using the snap-on combs, we always recommend using a 30 blade underneath the snap-on. And the reason is, when you use a 40 blade is a little bit more narrow than a 30 blade, and it has these two little pieces of metal on each side that the hair tends to stick into, and the hair actually will get trapped as you're going through the coat, so you keep having to take your snap-ons off and blowing the hair out of the comb, or blowing the hair out of the blade. So we always recommend using a 30 blade underneath them.
Okay, now I'm just using my Bravera clipper, and I'm going to clean out the bottom of Juliet's foot here. And I scoop out that little V right in here, but then what I also do is I take my clipper and I just kind of edge along the pads. And this is going to help me in the long run. When I was first taught to groom, I would only take out that little V there, and then I would have to scissor all this. And it's really easy, if you have a dog with ticklish feet, to nick the pads when you go in there with scissors. So it's a lot easier if you just take your, and I have this on a 30 blade setting, and just take very lightly, just kind of edge the pads. You don't want to come up far on the sides of the foot, because when you put the foot down, you're going to be able to see it. So by doing that, it eliminates me having to scissor the whole bottom of the foot.
Another thing, if you want to lift this dog's back feet, make them look like they're more up on their toes, you can actually take out, I'll show you when she's done with this back pad.
This up in here?
Yes. You can actually just take out the hair right above that the little pad, the largest pad on the back of the foot. You can just take that hair out, and as you scissor it in, it's going to actually give the dog a little bit of lift and look like they're more up on their toes, instead of having all that hair hanging down behind the foot.
Good girl.
And notice Sue's not getting in with the clipper and really stretching that pad out. A lot of times we'll spread the pad out and dig the clipper down into the pads, and what happens is a lot of times you'll get a lot of clipper burn or irritation, and the dogs go home and start licking their feet. Now, one thing, if the dogs do get any skin irritation from your clipper work, or from shaving the bellies or shaving the rear end, your private areas, you can also use this on the poodle feet and face you're shaving. This is a product called Skinworks, and if you get any skin irritation, you can see it's just almost a cream substance, but you can take it, you can put it on wherever it's irritated on the dog's skin, and that will keep the dog from going home and having clipper burn or digging at themselves and scratching themselves raw as they get home. So this product, it's a cream base or a lotion base, and once you rub it into the dog's skin, it actually absorbs, so the dog's not going to go home and be greasy or oily, and it'll just absorb into the skin. The clients won't know you have it on them, and they'll be a lot more comfortable as they go home with this product on them.
Okay, now, excuse me, using the same clipper, I used a 30 on the feet, and with this particular clipper made by Wall, it's got 5 adjustments on the blade, so without having to stop and switch blades, I can switch it to a 10 blade and do around a rectum. So what I want to do, and I'm actually, I don't know if you can actually see it on camera, but I'm just kind of using just the edge of the clipper. You don't actually want to put the clipper right down on the rectum because the skin around there is very, very sensitive. So with an extremely light touch, you're just going to kind of move the hair away from the rectum just to help to clean up that area a little bit. You don't want to clean up, you don't want to make it really, really bald. You can see she's got a very light layer of hair still on here. I don't want to go a really close blade in that area because she'll end up getting very irritated. And then when I do her belly area, I pick up her leg, holding her knee in my hand and her tail, and that's going to help support her. And I'm going to come down and the same thing. I'm just going to kind of very light touch, scoop out around her little privates here. And you don't want to come down too far on the inside of the leg. So if I were to come down far on with my clipper work in her sanitary area, what will happen is she'll look very bow-legged from the inside. So it's just this small area around her private areas, and then the same thing on her belly. And I stand her up, hold both of her front legs, stand her up so she's comfortable, and I just scoop up just a little bit. You can come like almost as far up as into your sternum area.
You can actually see where the coat changes directions right here around where the navel is, I guess. Is it a navel?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the coat will change
Belly
directions
button.
right here in this area, and that's usually about the point where we'll clip up to.
Okay. If you have, well, we have a lot of clients that have male dogs, especially the ones that are young and they don't know to lift their leg yet, and they'll squat when they pee, and they can pee on this area. These dogs that have a lot of furnishings in here, they pee on this area. So you can actually clip up a little bit further, you know, on a male in front of the penis area. If you just make a thin stripe here so it doesn't show on the outside, you're not going to be able to see that that area was clipped out, but it'll keep it a lot cleaner and the dogs won't have so much stink to them.
Now by leaving the skirt and the legs a little bit fuller, you're going to see we're going to have a lot more stylized Maltese. If you could talk your customers into leaving this, you can actually create a lot of style. And see what happens is if we were to take all of the skirt off, you see how tall or how long his legs look all of a sudden, and he just loses a lot of the style and a lot of the shape that Sue's created by using the snap-on combs and leaving the skirt.
We're going to make her look cute. Because again, even though it's a pet trim, you still want people to be able to look at her and say, oh, that's a Maltese. And this client actually, when Jade said let's do a Maltese for a DVD, I had the perfect client. She has 6 of them, so she brought all 6 up to my shop so I could pick out which one I wanted. Okay, so now when I'm doing her feet, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comb everything down, and then carefully just picking her up. A lot of these toy breeds tend to have the knees that pop, so you want to be very careful. When I pick up her rear leg, I don't want to hold her just by her foot alone, because a lot of times what happens is they give a little tug and they'll pop their kneecap. And if a dog does that, and they'll hold it really tight up under them, if you just kind of massage it and work it out very gently, sometimes if you just put the dog aside, she'll work it out on her own. It's not anything that even really needs to be seen by a vet, but especially with a new groomer, it'll really panic them because the dogs will really hold that leg up tight and it's hard to continue. But if you just do a little bit of very light, easy massage, just a little bit of bending, and if they're still holding it up, put them aside. Just put them back in a crate, let them rest for a little bit, and they'll work it out on their own. So, but for that reason, when I'm picking up the back leg, I want to try to hold that knee and stifle joint, that bone right here. I want to hold that in my hand and give her a little bit more support. Now I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm just going to scissor everything that falls off along the bottom of the foot. Just take it off. Now, because Jay and I have been grooming for a long time, and I'm confident with this particular pair of shears that I'm using, you want to be, if you're a new groomer, you might want to start off with a smaller blade on your shear. So you might want to, this is a 8-inch shear. So you might want to start off with maybe a 5-inch shear, because I think a lot of times what happens with students or new groomers, that they're so focused on looking at what they're doing that they're not actually watching where the blade is, and it's really easy to nick. So you can see the only thing that I'm using really around her foot is just like the top inch of this blade, just to kind of get around and clean that all up. So you don't want to go in and really open up your shears at the chance of that you might possibly nick. So if you're new at it and you're a little bit insecure with what you're doing, start off with a smaller pair of scissors. All right, now I've scissored around the bottom of her foot, so I'm going to put her foot down and holding my shears out at an angle. I don't want to come straight up because I want to get her foot nice and tight, but I want it to be a little bit of a bevel. So I'm holding my shears at an angle, and I'm going to work my way around her foot to get a nice round foot. And like Jay said, by coming up a little bit on the back of the foot here, it makes her look like she's more up on her toes.
Another thing, if you have trouble on the drop-coated breeds where you're getting a lot of separation in the coat from going around the feet with a pair of straight or a pair of curves, you can always go back with the thinning shears and just soften that line up that you've set in with your scissors, and it'll make it look a lot more natural, so you won't have that really extreme tight foot that you've created with the scissors. So just by taking off, you can see she's just taking off the very tips, but it just softens it up. It just gives it just a little bit of texture, and it'll erase a lot of those distinct lines that you made with your scissors.
The Maltese tend to have very, very soft coats, so a lot of the work that we do on this dog will be with thinning shears. Basically, the only thing I use straight shears for is just scissoring around the feet. You're a good girl. Okay, I'm going to do this side. This is just loose hair from the table. And the same thing, you also want to remember your body positioning and what you're doing with the dog too. You can see I have her foot down pretty low, and it's another thing that a lot of new groomers tend to do. They're so focused on getting that foot that they bring the foot up to them instead of coming down to it. You don't ever want to raise their foot up above their hips. That's very, very uncomfortable, and you're going to find that the dog does a lot of tugging and kicking if you do that. So if you're having trouble with a dog that's not standing still and really not behaving, think about the positioning that you have the dog in and try to make it as comfortable on the dog as possible. A lot of static. It's a nice thing about the anti-stat spray is it doesn't have silicones in it, so it doesn't build up. You can continue to use it, and you're not going to get any kind of a waxy or oily coating on the dog's coat. It's just enough to cut down the static.
And it's not going to build up on your comb or your scissors. You're not going to have to strip the coat out in between groomings to get all of the product out of the coat. It's just something very light. And like Sue said, it just eliminates just enough static that you can get your comb through it. But you can really spray this on your hand. You really don't even feel it. I mean, it's that light of a mist.
Now when I'm trimming around her foot, I'm using this hand up here to kind of control. If you're having a hard time getting like the inside areas of the foot, I can actually use this and just kind of very slightly turn her leg, just very, very slightly. You can see she's not tugging, I'm not creating any kind of a problem for her. But as you work your way around her foot, you can kind of just turn the foot out just slightly and get those inside areas that are a little bit difficult. Now I'm just going to switch to my thinning shears again and just neaten up the edges a little bit.
And one thing about thinning shears, if you'll notice the way Sue's handling her thinning shears, she's not using them like a scissor. She's actually pulling the blade through the coat. A thinning shear is designed to blend and to thin the coat, and if you use it in one area and just keep scissoring in the same spot, it's going to wind up being used more like a scissor or making a cut more like a scissor rather than blending or thinning the coat. So as she goes through this coat, you can see she's pulling away. She's actually pulling the scissor through the coat, or the thinning shear through the coat. And that's what creates that nice natural look like we're getting around these feet. Notice a lot of these little the toy breeds, they always tend to get their tail in the way. Wherever you're scissoring, they always seem to put that tail in the way. So Sue grabbed the tail with her opposite hand, and she's actually holding the tail and the foot in the same hand. That way they can't whip that tail over and wind up getting it caught in the scissors.
It also gives you better control of the rear end of the dog. Okay, now I'm going to work on her front feet, and I'm holding just above her elbow, and that's going to help control her tugging and pulling. And you can see I just have her foot raised a little bit. She's comfortable. And using the tip of my shears, I'm going to trim around the bottoms of her feet.
And when she's going around the foot with these straight shears, she's got this shear, the angle of the shear is flat with the pad. So that way when the dog puts the foot back down on the table, all of that's nice and clean on the pad. So when they move around, they won't slide around on the kitchen floor. If you have hardwoods in your house, they get a lot better grip.
Okay, and I'm holding up her opposite foot so that I can see around the foot that I'm scissoring. And because I came up a little bit on the back part of the pad, that kind of gives me a little bit of a starting point. You can work your way around. And again, I'm holding the shears at a little bit of an angle. Holding my hand above her elbow, I can just slightly turn her leg so I can see the back of her leg better.
And another thing she did on the back of this foot, where the back pad is, she's got it tapered or angled up towards the back of the leg, so it's not flat. Otherwise, when you put the foot down, it's going to look like the dog's real flat-footed. Whoa. Flat-footed in the back.
Okay. Whoa.
That actually will lift the dog's foot up, and it gives the illusion that she's up on her toes a little bit more than she is.
And I'm going to take my thinners and just work my way around just to soften that look a little bit. That's a good girl. Just hold up this leg.
And once again, she's going around the foot with the thinning shear just to soften it up, try to make everything look as natural as possible on these little drop-coated breeds. You can do this on your Shih Tzus, your Lhasas, your Yorkies, Maltese, anything that has this type of coat, even your Schnauzers that have the legs where you get down and you're scissoring around the feet and the feet grow in a couple of different directions. You can use the thinning shears to soften that up.
Okay. Now on this foot, this foot's a little bit, a little bit more of a different angle. If you're right-handed, it's the opposite if you're left-handed. So I'm going to bring her foot forward, and the same thing. Just going to scissor off everything. And again, I'm trying to make sure that I'm only using the tip of my shears, so I'm careful and I know exactly where my blade is. Sometimes you have the dogs with the very, very ticklish feet where they're constantly trying to lift up their foot. If you hold your hand just above the elbow, and I use a little bit of pressure, and it'll help to keep the weight down on her foot so they can't keep, twitching their foot and tugging it away from you when you're trying to scissor around it.
Now what Sue's done with this particular trim, she's taken a dog that when it came to us just looked very plain, very common, didn't have much style to it, and she's actually created a lot of style and balanced this dog out pretty nicely with just the length she's leaving on the legs, the nice little skirt, the body's nice and short and tapered, and you've got these nice little round feet, and we're going to fix this head. Right now the head is the main thing that's sticking out and just looks really out of proportion with the rest of this dog's body. So we're going to try to just get everything blended in nice and neat and just give this dog a nice little personality trim.
Okay, she's just got it's a little bit full, so just using my thinning shears, I'm just going to kind of work my way up just to take off a little bit of length so we have more of a parallel line on the inside of her legs.
Now, if you were to do the same thing she just did with her thinning shears on the inside of the front leg, if you were to use straights in that area, what's going to happen is as you're cutting up the coat up into the leg, it's going to push the hair, and then once you let that dog's leg sit back down on the table, you're going to have a lot of separation in the coat. That's why we always use the thinning shears on these drop-coated breeds. And the thinning shears we're using, it's actually one of my Cobra series shears that I designed, and it's a 44 tooth thinning shear. And we found that the 44 teeth actually gives you it's more of a finishing thinning shear. It doesn't take a lot of bulk out, but it gives you a nice, neat finish. And that's normally what you'll see us using in our videos. That's the main blender or thinner that we will use in the videos.
Blender or thinner, which is it?
It blends and it thins. So there are some products on the market that are called blenders and some are called thinning shears, but you actually do a lot of blending work with thinning shears. And the thinning shears we use, they have the teeth on one side and the blade on the other. And there are some blending shears on the market that have the teeth on both sides. So as they close together, you don't have one flat, smooth cutting blade. You've got two blades that feed off of each other, and they actually do more. They're called blending shears, but I know you can do blending and thinning with either tool.
Okay, I'm just neatening up her front legs a little bit. When you don't want to actually come down and take this hair off the front of the leg, so with the dog standing, you can do a little bit of, and you can see how I'm bringing my shears down and kind of sliding it out. I can see where she's got a little extra bulk in certain areas, so I'm going to come down with my thinning shears, and it's almost like you're layering. You start at the top and you work your way down, and just from standing in front of her I can see where there's any kind of bulk sticking out. If she has a lot of extra hair on the inside, in the front part of her legs, what I usually do is to pick up the leg and just comb the hair off to the side, and you'll be able to see anything that's sticking out on this line here going up the side of her leg, and then the same thing on the inside of her leg, and that's actually enough to take off what needs to come off on the front of the leg.
Now what Sue just did in this area here, if we were to take our scissors, our straight scissors, and do that same technique and cut it with the straight scissors, that's where we wind up getting a lot of separation. And you can see how nice and neat this blends into the dog's leg just by using the thinning shears. Now, one thing, if you notice while she's combing, she's using her comb a lot while she's scissoring this dog. And she doesn't take the comb and she doesn't pull the hair up in this direction. Just like we talked about in the drying, that would interrupt the direction that the coat lays. And as we combed it up this way, if we went in and cut it, once we laid it back down, it'd be a lot shorter than we wanted it to be. So anytime you're combing these drop-coated breeds, take the comb and pull it out away from the dog. Don't lift up like we would on a poodle or a Bichon or something like that. So we're just pulling that dog's hair right out away from the skin, keeping it in the same direction it grows, and then we'll thin in the same direction.
Okay, a lot of times when you're coming down with your snap-on comb, this whole throat and chest area is a series of cowlicks that go in different directions. I came straight down with my snap-on, but then if you have any of these cowlicks that are sticking out, if you come in with your thinning shears, you can just kind of tip off the long wings of the cowlick, and it'll smooth it out and get it to lie a little bit flatter. It'll make her neck cleaner. It'll actually make her look like she has a little bit more neck. So I'm going right up into that tight area up in here that Jay had talked about with her head. Oops. To be able to separate her head from the rest of her body. This long stuff right here, just go in with your thinning shears and just kind of, I don't want to go really tight. I want to go the same length that that I've already made with the snap-on comb. But you can just blend out those little wings from the cowlicks and get that to be a nice, neat chest.
And you'll notice when Sue's working on this dog, she's got the dog up to a good level of her work area. A lot of groomers, if you're not using a hydraulic table and you're grooming, you're having to do a lot of bending and a lot of leaning over. That's going to wear on your back and your arms, and just physically it's just going to wear you down in the long run. So always make sure you have a hydraulic table. This isn't a Demco table we're using, it's the electric table, so we can actually take this table and whatever height she needs to set it at, if she needs to move him up, you know, while she's doing move her up while she's doing the feet, she can. If she wants to lower it while she's doing the head, she can. And this it makes it a lot easier on your back. And you'll actually be grooming for a lot longer just by using these tools of the trade that make our life so much easier to groom with.
This table's got a nice swivel arm on it also, so it's easy to, whatever side of the dog that I'm working on, I can get the dog, get the arm out of my way. Okay, I'm going to put her head back in here.
And another thing, if you're walking around, you know, if you're in a shop environment and you're having to move around the dog a lot, this arm actually swivels all the way around the table, so we can keep it out of our way as we're grooming. We can, you know, if we're on this side of the dog, we can move it. If we need to get to this side of the dog, we can move it back. So that's a great feature on this particular table.
Okay, now on her back legs, sorry, and her rear end area here. Now I've already cleaned up around her rectum with a 10 blade, and then I came down to that bend in the leg. So when you lift up the leg, she's got that little bend. I came down to that bend, and just as with the chest, this is a whole series of cowlicks. So if I go in with my thinning shears, and you're kind of going the way the cowlicks grow, you can neaten this up, it can tighten up her rear end, it'll give her a really cute little butt, and it's also taken off this long hair that especially these little white dogs, low to the ground dogs, tend to poop on. You know, when they squat to go to the bathroom, this is going to keep this all nice and clean for her. And because she's going to hold her tail up over her back, I'm going to take this area here on the sides nice and tight, and this long stuff that's sticking out, I'm going to take that off with my thinning shears also. So when she carries her tail up, this is a nice little rounded rear end on her.
Once we turn this dog back around, I mean, what she just did, just by taking off a ½ inch of hair, it created such a nice angle in the back, and I mean, it really shortened this dog up a lot in body and gave it a lot of style to this dog's rear end.
Thank you.